Next on Unsolved Mysteries. A young man is convicted of a brutal murder and sent to prison for life. Why is he still behind bars when this man has confessed to the crime? When a 15-year-old schoolgirl falls in love with a dangerous criminal, she becomes an accessory to murder. A young man shows up at a small airport and tries to catch a ride on a private plane. It's the last time that he's seen alive. Strange noises and unexplained apparitions frighten a couple in their new home. Join us for 5 cases with twists and turns that you can hardly believe. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. Aurora, Missouri. With a population of just 7,000, Aurora is a small town where everyone knows everyone else. And everyone in town knew Johnny Lee Wilson, an easygoing, mentally challenged 20-year-old with the emotional development of a 3rd grader. Johnny had been lovingly raised by his mother and grandmother.
I'm Mrs. Mark.
On school days, Johnny would often leave his bicycle with Mrs. Pauline Martz, afraid that his classmates might vandalize it. Pauline was a close friend of Johnny's grandmother.
See you after school.
At 79, Pauline was the last surviving member of the wealthiest family in Aurora and owned the town's largest business. One evening at about 8 p.m., the local fire department rushed to Pauline's home. By the time they arrived, the house was totally engulfed in flames. When they were finally able to search the wreckage, they found Pauline's charred body. The official cause of death was smoke inhalation, but the fire was not an accident. Pauline had been bound and gagged with rope and duct tape. Investigators concluded that the fire was arson. It had been deliberately set with gasoline. The town was stunned by the ghastly crime. Pauline had been one of Aurora's most beloved citizens. 5 days later, anger turned to shock when police picked up Johnny Lee Wilson for questioning. They grilled him for nearly 4 hours until he finally confessed to the crime, a confession he would later recant. The case of Johnny Lee Wilson divided the town of Aurora. Some strongly believed that Johnny was innocent, but police insisted that the right man was behind bars. Did Johnny murder Pauline Martz, or was he convicted of a crime that someone else committed? On the day of the fire, Johnny spent the afternoon at home with a friend. Later, he mowed a neighbor's lawn. When he was finished, his mother drove him back home. She and his grandmother claimed that Johnny could not possibly have been anywhere near the Martz house when the fire was set.
They didn't get home until about 5 o'clock. And as soon as they got home, the neighbor boy came back over again.
And then when they left at 7, Johnny and I put up 9 posters in his bedroom. And then when that was done, then about 25 to 8, we left and went and mailed 2 letters, went up to Ramey's, got some things. And then when we came out, that's when we heard the sirens.
Johnny got out of the car to watch the fire.
Hey, Johnny, how's it going? Not bad. How about you?
He was approached by 18-year-old Gary Wall, a classmate in the special education program at the local high school.
See you later. Bye.
Basically, I just said, hi, how are you, and, by, you know, and then I went back to the car and sat in the back seat, and that was it.
Hey, Johnny. Hey.
The next morning, Gary gave police a completely different version of his conversation with Johnny.
Mrs. Marks is in there. Well, how do you know? Tied up. Well, you sound like you know something about this. You tell anybody and I'm gonna beat you up. Okay, Johnny.
Gary Wall took a total of 6 polygraphs. He failed all but one. The morning after Johnny's arrest, sheriff's deputies went to the Wilson home to search for evidence.
They came to search the house and said they had a warrant, and I gave them permission to search because I didn't think they'd find anything, see. But they did. I mean, they thought they did. They went to his room and just started taking things out of drawers and cabinets and things that was in there.
Authorities suspected that Pauline Martz had been sexually assaulted before the fire. When they found a drawer full of women's underwear in Johnny's bedroom, it fit their theory. However, the family said the bureau and clothing belonged to Johnny's mother. Deputies also found costume jewelry, which Johnny's grandmother said that she used for sewing. But during his confession, Johnny told detectives that he had stolen jewelry from the Martz home. When they found an empty gas can in the garage, deputies were convinced that Johnny was the killer. Johnny was charged with first-degree murder, but because of his diminished mental faculties, the court needed to determine if he was fit to stand trial.
What'd you like about high school?
I was a manager for the football team. They gave me a jacket and everything.
Right. Did you have any friends in school?
When you're asked to evaluate someone's fitness to stand trial, you look at first whether they understand what the charges are against them, and then second, are they able to reason and make their own decisions about whether to enter a plea? Are they able to decide whether they want to testify in their own behalf at a trial? Are they able to help their attorney by giving him a consistent account of what happened? And in those particular range of skills, I did not think Johnny was competent to stand trial.
Johnny, when the police arrested you, did they ask you anything about Miranda rights?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you know what Miranda rights are?
Yeah.
What are they?
It's the difference between right and wrong.
Johnny was examined by 2 psychiatrists and a psychologist. 2 of them found that Johnny was not capable of understanding the court proceedings. However, the third, a court-appointed psychiatrist, determined that Johnny was fit to stand trial. Johnny told his attorneys that he was innocent. But based upon his confession and the testimony of Gary Wall, he was advised to plead guilty. This meant that Johnny would lose his right to a trial by jury.
Because he had given a confession, his attorneys told him that it would be very likely that he would get convicted if this went to trial. And they also told him that this judge was very likely to give him the death penalty based on prior cases that had gone before this judge. And so what he understood was if he went to trial and he was found guilty, that he would die.
What is your understanding of why you're here this afternoon?
Plead guilty.
Why are you pleading guilty, Johnny?
I don't know.
Pardon?
This recreation of Johnny's hearing is taken directly from court transcripts.
Just a first-degree murder.
But that's what you're pleading guilty to. Why are you wanting to enter such a plea?
I don't know.
The so-called plea of guilty should have been stopped about 60 seconds after it started. The judge asked Johnny if he knew what he was doing, and Johnny Wilson said no. I don't understand why I'm here. I don't understand what's going on. And the judge said, do you want to plead guilty to this charge? And Johnny said, no, I don't want to plead guilty to it. At that point, the circuit judge should have said, gentlemen, court's adjourned. This case will be set for trial in 2 weeks. I expect everyone to be here and be ready for trial. I'm not going to take this plea of guilty. But he didn't. The judge went further, continued to cross-examine Johnny, and finally accepted the plea of guilty.
Upon your plea of guilty in this cause, the court sentences you to life imprisonment in the custody of the Missouri Department of Corrections. Court stands adjourned.
Johnny Wilson was sent to the Missouri State Prison to begin serving his life sentence. 10 months later, at a prison in Kansas, this man claimed that he knew who killed Pauline Martz and that it wasn't Johnny Wilson. Up next, can Johnny Lee Wilson get a new trial and prove his innocence? Johnny Lee Wilson, a mentally challenged 20-year-old, confessed to the murder of Pauline Martz and was sentenced to life in prison. 2 years later, a convicted felon named Chris Brownfield confessed to participating in the attack on Martz. Brownfield was serving a life sentence for accessory to murder in a separate case. According to Brownfield, the crime began when he was tipped off that Pauline Martz kept a lot of cash in her home. Brownfield said he made plans to rob Pauline Martz after learning about the cash in her home. Brownfield and a partner, not Johnny Lee Wilson, broke into the Martz home.
Just watch her.
According to Brownfield, they ransacked the house.
Where's your money at, lady, huh?
Pauline was bound and gagged. Brownfield and his accomplice decided to burn down the house so that no evidence would be left at the scene. In his confession, Brownfield stated that he was outside when his partner started the fire. The two men then fled the scene. When Brownfield's confession went public, it caused an uproar. One group of citizens banded together and erected this billboard. A short time later, it was firebound. Attorney Dee Wampler was hired to represent Johnny and to reopen the case. Wampler was convinced that he can prove that Johnny's confession had been coerced.
First time the state of Missouri has ever put a third grader on trial for murder.
Thank you very much.
Johnny Lee Wilson was at a movie theater on the night that he supposedly confessed, and they tricked him into going with them to the police headquarters. He had lost a billfold several days earlier, and they came and asked him to go to the police station, and he thought that he was going because they had found his billfold.
Johnny, did you lose a wallet?
Yeah.
We found it. We got it down at the police station. If you come down and identify it, you can pick it up, take it on home.
Okay.
Come on, quick.
His mother and grandmother were not told that they were going to question him that evening.
John, is there any possibility that you are involved in this?
No.
What if I told you I thought you was?
The police interrogation began at 8:30 p.m. and ended just after midnight.
What if I told you was seen at that fire before it started?
Well, I'd say I was.
The words spoken in these scenes are taken directly from a transcript of police tape recordings.
What would you do if we brought in a witness in here, in this chair, and he sat here and looked you right in the eye and said, John, you was there before that fire started?
They kept on saying, well, we know you did it. We know we got a witness saying that you told him you did it, and after that, you know, I maintained my innocence. I said I didn't do it. I don't know who did. I didn't do it.
Murder's what you're in here for.
They started yelling, saying, well, we know you did it. You're going to tell us that you did it, so we can just get this all wrapped up so we can all go home.
I didn't know she was tied up. How'd that information get out? There's a whole bunch of people out there that night that came up with information that she was tied up.
The language used was so aggressive. What an ordinary individual might have done at that point was to end the interview or ask for their attorney. But being a fairly young man who was limited intellectually and no prior experience with the criminal justice system and the emotional stability of an 8 or 9-year-old, they're not going to know to say, get out of my face, stop talking to me, and I want to end this. He didn't think he had the permission to end
You
this.
know too much. Why'd Gary make up something like that on you? He mad at you?
At the end of the interrogation, he forced my head back, and that's when I said, okay, I did it. But when I really didn't, that's when I lied.
What besides a rope was around her ankles?
As the interrogation continued, deputies pressed for more details.
You know, and I know. Just think. Come on, John.
Thinking.
Well, what are some of the things that could be used?
Handcuffs, I think.
No, wrong guess.
They just simply said, if you'll tell us what we want to know, we can all go home. And he was just acting like a child that has brain damage, and he thought, okay, I'll tell them what they want to know, and then we'll all go home.
But Johnny did not go home.
At the end of the confession, they slapped the handcuffs on me and walked me out the door and drove me to Mount Vernon and locked me up. That's when I thought, no, I ain't going home over something that I think just ruined my life. I'd sat in my jail cell, just thinking, I didn't do this, The bottom line, I just want to go home.
A former deputy sheriff named Dustin Toller began looking closely at the evidence in the case. Soon, he came to Johnny's defense.
As I got into the reports, I observed that what was being said about Johnny Wilson by the Sheriff's Department and other investigative agencies and what was substantiated by evidence were not the same thing.
Toller discovered that the costume jewelry in the Wilson home did belong to Johnny's grandmother, not to Pauline Martz. The underwear did belong to Johnny's mother, not Pauline. And finally, the gas can found at the crime scene did not belong to Johnny Wilson. But the key finding had never been entered into evidence.
The more I observed, the less evidence I could find. I never did find anything that could tie Johnny Wilson to the case.
There was one very important piece of evidence that was discovered at the crime scene, but then ignored. A battery-operated stun gun. In his confession, Brownfield stated that he lost the stun gun during the robbery.
It had never been publicized that a stun gun had been used in this crime. Chris Brownfield, in his confession, was the first one who ever mentioned the stun gun. He described the stun gun and drew a picture of it that was identical to the stun gun that was eventually found at the crime scene. Johnny Lee Wilson didn't even know what a stun gun was. He was asked about it. He thought a stun gun was an electric razor.
With his case well prepared, D. Wampler presented a motion to the court requesting a jury trial for Johnny. The motion was denied. The court ruled that when Johnny pled guilty, he understood the charges against him and was mentally competent to stand trial. The judge also found that Chris Brownfield was not credible.
Justice has been very difficult to find in the Johnny Wilson case. It's one of those cases, perhaps there's only 1 in 1,000, where an innocent man is doing time in the penitentiary. And Johnny Lee Wilson is innocent, and it's a shame that he never got a chance to prove his innocence.
All I want somebody to believe in me, just that I didn't do this.
Update. After a lengthy review, the governor of Missouri pardoned Johnny Lee Wilson. The governor concluded that police had coerced Johnny's confession. Johnny served 8 years in prison before being released. Today, he is a free man. Next, a family's life is turned upside down when a powerful force refuses to leave their home. This is a quiet suburb near Atlanta, Georgia, where Jim and Kay Tatum built a new home, and planned to retire. But 5 months after they moved in, the Tatums began to experience unusual events. A series of incidents that forced them to put their house up for sale. And for this reason, they requested we not show it. But they did allow us to film inside. One night, Kay Tatum couldn't sleep. She sensed a strange presence in the hall outside of her bedroom. Kay caught a glimpse of a man walking past her door.
It was definitely a man, and he was swinging his arm slightly, and his head was slightly bent, and he walked briskly past me. Jim! And at first I thought it was my husband. And I went into the bedroom, and there my husband was in the bed, so I thought we had a burglar.
Jim searched the house.
There's no evidence of any entry. There's no evidence of anyone having been in the house. And I thought perhaps Kay had been using an overactive imagination.
I had fear, and I was perplexed about what happened. While I was tossing and turning, I suddenly remembered that I didn't hear any sound as he passed me. And I still am unable to figure out why it happened.
2 months passed without further incident. Then one night, Jim was working upstairs on the house. He stopped when Kay called him down to dinner.
Jim, dinner's ready.
In a minute. I specifically unplugged the drill because it's a very old drill. I thought it might be dangerous to leave it plugged.
As the evening wore on, he wanted to watch a movie, and I decided to go upstairs and read.
1 hour later, Kay heard the sound of the drill outside of her room. Kay says that she just assumed that Jim was teasing her about having seen a ghost. It wasn't long before she felt the joke had gone on long enough. When she got to the hallway, it was empty and the drill was unplugged.
I was really frightened, and I reached down and felt out and it was ice cold. It had not been turned on.
I was very confused. I knew very well that something was happening because Kay is very level-headed, and she was truly frightened.
The strange events continued. One night, Kay heard the sound of coins falling in a bowl, but she was alone in the room. Another time, while cooking, Kay felt 2 sharp tugs on her blouse.
After that incident, I decided we have a problem in this house. Something going on. It's not something that we can understand or explain, but there's something definitely going on.
These strange occurrences all seemed to be centered on Kay. She and Jim were terrified by what was happening in their home, so they turned to an expert for help.
This is where most of the things have been happening.
You know, the question comes up, why is this family having these experiences? Is there a sort of ghost that has come back to haunt them for some unknown reason, or what's taking place? A lot of people have these experiences. It's part of who we are as humans to have so-called psychic experiences.
Dr. Rowe believes that memories can actually be transferred to physical objects, and these residual memories can be triggered by ordinary people.
The nature of his presence seems to be a teasing type of thing, as though it's teasing us.
It wasn't long before Jim finally had his first strange experience. It started with this small bell. Jim always got up hours before Kay. When Kay woke up, she would ring the bell if she needed anything upstairs.
I'd grown used to climbing the stairs after hearing the bell. So I did so, and it wasn't Kay. She was asleep. So I went in and looked at the bell, and it was there. And I thought, obviously, I heard something else other than the bell.
After the 3rd time this happened, the Tatums decided to make up a code in order to outwit the entity.
If it rings 3 times, I'll come on up the stairs.
All right, we'll do that.
So the next time, it rang 3 times. I knew this was Kay because this was our signal. But Kay was sound asleep. And the bell was in the other bedroom where it stays. I went in and looked at it. I turned around and walked out the door, and the thing rang again. Then I began to see how Kay felt. I mean, I was frightened. The hair stood up on my neck. I told Kay then, I said, no more bell. I'm not going to answer that bell anymore. And that bell has not rung since.
I've never seen him like that before.
There are a number of haunting cases that are not very striking, not very strong, but where the phenomena nevertheless are disturbing to the family. It might be a bell ringing, a fleeting glimpse of an apparition. The events are trivial, but they're deeply upsetting to the family because they don't fit into the picture that most of us have of the world. And that image of the physical world, particularly of our home, is intricately related to who we picture ourselves as being.
In the end, things got so bad that the Tatums moved out of their home and put it up for sale. They left behind the spirit, or whatever it was, to live in the house all alone. Next, a courier carrying more than $10,000 is robbed and killed by an ex-con and a 15-year-old girl. Hancock, Maryland. Melissa Monday was known as Missy to her friends. She was an honor student at the local high school and a member of the Future Homemakers of America.
She was in probably the top 10% of her class. She enjoyed what she was doing. She got along well. And if I could have gauged it, I would have gauged it everything was satisfactory because that's the way she seemed to be here at school.
Missy was a very shy person. She'd only go to her basketball games, her choir practice, or maybe a couple ball games. We always knew where she was at. When she got done, she'd call us. We'd go pick her up and bring her back home.
One day, a stranger showed up on Missy's doorstep. His name was Jerry Strickland, and he said that he was looking for a property to convert into a small orphanage. He stopped by Missy's home to find out who owned the farm next door.
Hi, how are you today?
When I first met Jerry, I thought, well, you know, he's a smooth talker. I mean, it was his actions, the way he talked. He was so demanding. I didn't care for his attitude.
But Missy was intrigued by Jerry. Her first glimpse was the beginning of a relationship that would change her life forever.
She really liked him a lot. Every time he came out, he brought her a gift. And he gave her a lot of attention that she didn't get at home.
She went out with him in the evening after her mom got home, and she said that she got home late, but her mom didn't know who she was with, and she lied to her, told her she was with a friend.
Over the next few weeks, Missy snuck out of the house to see Strickland. He told her that he had a tragic past, including the death of his first wife and child in a terrible car accident. Missy was swept off her feet.
She had boy crushes at school, you know, like childhood sweethearts, stuff like that. But as far as going out with the boys, she never paid that much of an interest in them. That's what I don't understand about this and Jerry.
Got something for you.
Oh, it's beautiful.
You like it?
Yeah.
Put it on.
She had bought a ring, she said, for a souvenir. I come find out later, Jerry had gave her the ring. And I took her at her word, because Missy never did lie to me. That's why I never dreamt it was going to happen next.
Bye, Mom. The bus is here.
It was an ordinary school day, and Missy left to catch the bus.
I'll never forget that day. She said, I'm going to school now. I'll see you this evening. I said, all right. That was it. That was the last word she spoke to me.
Missy hadn't gone to school. She got in Jerry's car and left the state.
I didn't believe it. Missy wasn't that kind of a person. Because I knowed Missy, I raised her. It was just a big change in that one day when she just left.
Even as she drove away with Jerry Strickland, Missy had no idea who he was. Jerry Strickland's wife and child had not died. He just left them behind. Strickland had also been arrested for passing bad checks and convicted of assault. He had also raped his sister-in-law, then cut her throat and left her for dead. This was not a nice guy.
Jerry?
What?
I think the baby's sick.
When Missy gave birth to a son, Jamie, she never told her family.
Should we get some medicine or something?
She told me that she was very unhappy at home, and that's why she was with Jerry. It was because he took her away from home.
Look, I'm working, all right?
I never seen him kiss, never held hands. I thought that was a little strange. I remember asking her about it once, and she said that he wasn't very affectionate.
To help make ends meet, Missy took a job at a gas station. There, she met Elmer DeBoer, a courier for the oil company who picked up cash deposits for the local gas stations. Over time, Missy and Elmer became friends.
How's Jer?
Oh, it's kind of distant lately.
He understood that she was going through a really rough time, being married to this guy, and they didn't have anything for the baby and stuff like that. He was a very understanding man, very loving.
On a Monday morning, Elmer came by as usual to pick up cash from the station. When customers stopped by an hour later, the station was deserted. The police arrived and found Elmer's car in the parking lot. The office was locked.
We checked the interior of the station and found that there was nobody inside, but the safe had been opened, and there was in excess of $10,000 stolen.
There's nothing but change in here, David.
Melissa knew Elmer's routine because of her position as assistant manager to that particular station. She knew when he was going to pick up and where.
Police believe that Strickland planned the crime and was waiting with Missy for Elmer. When Elmer opened the safe, Strickland made his move.
Don't move, Elmer, don't move! All right. Stand. Come on, put your arms up. Put them up, Missy, put the cuffs on. Move! Hurry up on yourself, too. Now! On yourself, too, Missy, let's go.
Police guessed that Strickland wanted to convince Elmer that Missy was also a victim.
We feel that Elmer was handcuffed to Missy on the pretext that she was going to be hurt. And Elmer went along with it. Reluctantly, but to protect Melissa.
Happened. I'm taking Missy with me, and you're just gonna wait here, all right?
Then he unlocked the handcuffs to show Elmer that he wasn't really going to hurt Melissa, but he just wanted the money. And then he shot Elmer twice in the back of the head.
At first, I couldn't believe that it could have happened that way. It was unbelievable. It was something that you'd never expect out of Melissa.
Well, what do you think? You want to take her home?
The morning after the murder, Strickland and Missy were seen in Pontiac, Michigan, buying a truck and paying for it with cash.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
While Strickland went to get insurance, Missy chatted with a salesman.
Now you got this 2.5 hours that she was alone. She could have told the salesman of Lucky Auto Sales. She could have picked the phone up and called the police herself to say, let me out of this. I'm in trouble. I need help. She's as guilty as Jerry Strickland is, even though she did not pull the trigger. She's as guilty of first-degree murder.
They obviously aren't the people that they made everybody believe. They're liars. They're phonies. There wasn't any reason for him to die. And they could do that to somebody like that. Who knows what they've done or what they could do now.
I never noticed a change in her. I didn't notice a split in her personality, unless I didn't want to. But Missy's gone. I don't know if I'll ever see her again or not.
Update. When this story aired, more than a dozen viewers recognized the two fugitives and called police. Jerry Strickland and Missy Mundy were arrested. Murder and kidnapping charges against Missy were dropped in exchange for her testimony against Strickland in the murder of Elmer DeBoer. Missy pleaded guilty to 1 count of armed robbery. She served 7 months in a juvenile facility and was released when she turned 19. Jerry Strickland was found guilty on several charges, including kidnapping and the murder of Elmer DeBoer. He was sentenced to serve 2 life terms without the possibility of parole. Next, a young man disappears after trying to hitch a flight from a remote airfield. Paducah, Kentucky. A small airfield.
Yes. Are you a pilot? No, I'm sure not. Do you know a pilot I can talk to? No, I sure don't.
A young man approaches airport worker Wes Weaver.
Out west. Is there anybody here I can talk to? No, I sure don't. Listen, I'm really in a bind. I really need to get out west.
I kind of thought that maybe he was running from something. Because he didn't act drugged up, and he didn't act like he was drunk, and he really didn't act crazy. Just kind of desperate.
Come on, man. I mean, look, I've got this jacket. Isn't there some way I could trade this jacket for a lift? You know,
what began as an odd encounter would soon become a tragic and puzzling mystery.
I finally just kind of told him no and made it to the point to where, he should leave. And he stood around for a little while, and finally he went back through the hangar.
30 minutes later, Wes Weaver saw the stranger again.
And he had the jacket on, and I thought it was kind of strange. So I kind of slowed down and watched, and I saw him run across the ditch and jump up on the fence and jump over and run towards the plane, and that's when I radioed for someone to call security.
We got a guy jumping over the fence at 2-2.
There were other witnesses who saw the young man running across the airstrip.
Me and my husband was out in the yard, and we saw this guy running in the field, and he run over to on the other side of the plane. Well, we never did see him no more.
The way he was running to it so fast, he was up to something.
At the time, the only aircraft on the runway was a commuter flight bound for Memphis, Tennessee. Just before sunset, the plane was cleared for takeoff. Everything seemed normal.
The plane got way up in the air, and I stood there, was watching. In a few minutes, I seen something fall. And I told my husband, I said, something fell out of that plane.
Shortly after dark, airport authorities mobilized a search looking for any sign of the man the witnesses had seen. At the north end of the runway, Ron Jones noticed that the fence had been damaged. Lying on the ground was the crumpled body of the young stranger.
It really hit me then that this actually happened, that someone actually got onto an aircraft some kind of way and that someone had fallen to their death.
No identification of any kind was found on or near the body.
As we examine the hand, we note that the nails appear to be manicured and well-groomed.
Blood tests revealed no traces of drugs or alcohol in the victim's system. This is the jacket worn by the young man. Sewn into the collar was an ID tag inscribed Lieutenant L.F. Price, United States Air Force. A check of military records could find no such person.
When we go back and look at this series of events that led up to this incident, the individual had approximately 90 seconds to 2 minutes to climb over a 7.5-foot high fence, traverse approximately 800 foot of terrain, including one ditch system, run around the aircraft's tail section, and then climb on the aircraft, although we have no actual eyewitnesses to his climbing on the aircraft. And again, the time interval was between 90 seconds and 120 seconds. It's quite an accomplishment.
Within seconds, the plane was barreling down the runway at 125 miles an hour. Once airborne, its speed increased to more than 190 miles an hour.
And that obviously is a substantial wind force upon anyone trying to stay on the wing of an aircraft with really no handholds. We judge at this point that he managed to stay on for approximately 3,000 to 3,500 feet after the aircraft departed the ground.
I wonder what was so important to make him take a chance on trying to catch a ride on the outside of an aircraft.
I think that there's an answer with his family. His family may not have even known that he was coming home. And I think that that's probably, if we could just get over that hurdle there, I think we could find out why.
Update.
The identity of the young man who fell to his death remained a mystery for nearly 8 years. And though the locals didn't know who he was, they often brought flowers to his grave.
The story was kept alive by a reporter from Paducah who included an account on his website. And that's where the young man's stepmother found it. Fingerprints confirmed that he was Brian Deeker, a 28-year-old schizophrenic. Brian was known to disappear for long periods of time. His reasons for climbing onto the airplane remain a mystery.